Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in. First, folks, got a lot to talk about. First, let's talk about Ja Morant. This is the Grizzlies basketball player who was suspended for brandishing a gun in an IG Live video. We'll talk about what he did and, more importantly, the burden of black masculinity. We'll have that conversation. Also, let's talk about why it's important for us to fight the self-made myth and how it may save America. The whole idea of pulling up your bootstraps is what some folks are saying is at the root of the destruction of the country. We'll share with you a little bit about what one writer had to say and your thoughts. And then later, we're going to talk about the Office of Missing and Murdered Black Women that was established in the first office in the state of Minnesota. And we're going to talk about that, the impact that it has, and could we see other states employing the same strategy to make sure that our black women are coming home safe and sound. We'll have those conversations and a whole lot more, so stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got a lot to talk about, so I want to jump right in. First up, we're going to talk about this story about basketball player Ja Morant. Now, you may have heard the story, but this is the player who was suspended for brandishing a gun on an Instagram live post. Now, this is a black man, a young black man, who played for the team, the Colorado Grizzlies. And he displayed this gun while having, an Instagram live chat. Now, as a result of that, many people felt like something had gone wrong, because here's a man who is at the top of his field. He is one of the phenomenal basketball players for the Grizzlies. He is in the NBA. But more importantly, folks are seeing that something has inherently gone wrong for him to take such a bold move to show his masculinity and prove his manhood by brandishing a gun on camera. And I'm sorry, the Memphis Grizzlies, not Colorado. Thank you. Memphis Grizzlies that he plays for. So today, as folks have been trying to figure out what's going on and how this happens, we wanted to kind of talk about the burden of black masculinity. And this really continues the conversation that we have been having culturally on social media and even on this platform about black masculinity, whether you're talking about the idea of being corny with Michael B. Jordan to what we saw with the cover of Ebony magazine with Jonathan Majors. Black masculinity continues to be a major topic, and in the past couple of weeks, it continues to have so many different dynamics and nuances that I think is worthy for a discussion. So I want to share with you a little bit of what one recent writer had to say about the Ja Morant situation, and then we're going to check in with my brother Shinedu Wakorfor, who is a diversity, equity, inclusion specialist, who can give us his take on what it means to be a black man, and more important, the great burden of black masculinity. Now, check this out. This is from The Root. The writer wrote this piece about Ja Morant, and this was the inspiration for this conversation. Take a look at this, folks. In The Root, it was published that Morant's descent from grace has been narrated by asking, why would Ja Morant, a black man raised in a two-parent household, who attended a private school in the suburbs, act as if he came from a single-parent home in the hood? American society had fooled itself into believing that refashioning gender roles, social identities, and American values by affixing black to them frees us from a colonized psyche. But this exodus is an illusion that leads us to the same colonization we are trying to escape. I want to start here, and then there's another piece of this op-ed that we're going to share. But let me bring in my brother Shinedu Wakorfor on this piece. And Shinedu, I appreciate you as always. I love your insight and your brilliance. And good to see you this afternoon, bro. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Farajii.
Absolutely. All right, so let's look at the situation with Ja Morant. Here's why I think that this is worthy of discussion. It's not his situation is not something outside of the norm. Unfortunately, we have seen young black males in particular who have gotten to a certain level of success, a certain level of influence and power. They are making more money. Their lives have been changed for the better, quote unquote. And yet, there are moments where a moments of self-sabotage starts to happen, right? Where you see like what you see with Ja Morant, where he is brandishing a gun on an IG video. He was suspended by the Memphis Grizzlies for a few games. He'll come back from that suspension. There were no charges that were filed by the police department in Memphis for that situation. But it's just the simple fact that it happened. And then looking at this piece from the root, talking about black masculinity and how the fact that just because you attach black to something does not free us from a colonized psyche. What did you see, bro, in this whole situation? Because there are a couple of things, there are so many layers to it, but what did you see? And then let's talk about that.
Let's have the conversation. I'll tell you what I saw. I saw a young black man make a very foolish mistake. And it should be, in my opinion, it should be just predicated there. He wasn't shooting that gun. Thank God there wasn't an accidental slip up. But what I noticed that we do is when black men make errors, just errors that any human being can make, it becomes a deeper, is he a part of the Crips, as Skip Bayless said, or is he a part of a gang? It's like now we're under microscope. We're studying this man with a gun. Guns are the major killers of children in this country. No one's studying when people actually disengage the firearm into a crowd of people at a church, or a crowd of people at a grocery store, a crowd of people at a school. It leads to no big legislative change. It just leads to a hubbub. But I feel like what is happening is that they're making a mountain out of a molehill. What he did it was not good. It wasn't. It was wrong. But I think he made a mistake. And this is the thing. It's unfortunate to me that black people are, just because you get a good position or you've made it in corporate America or even in the National Football Association, Basketball Association, there's this idea that automatically everybody should just have the rules. Human beings make mistakes, and it's not attached to race for me. Human beings make mistakes, and I think it's very important that we don't. Yes, what he did was very, very stupid, and he should have known better. But he might be having a hard time adjusting to his life and where he is and his personal time, because what he did was his personal time. But I think he has to understand that as a professional who is representing a team, you have to be cognizant of all you do.
Well, so, and I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Now, one of the big reasons why he has came out to say that he's been under some great deal of stress, right? And which I understand. I mean, you're going from one status in life to the next status. You're trying to adjust. You got money that's been thrown in your face. You got people coming up to you. You're the face. You're the new phenom for the team. All of that, right? So you're trying to deal with that, which is understandable. But I do think that it's worthy of some discussion because, again, it's not as if Ja Morant is an outlier of the situation. There's a pattern. Now, here's the pattern. The pattern comes from, going back to what the writer for that root piece said, you come from a two-parent home, right? You grew up in the suburbs. You went to school in a private school. These quote unquote on paper sound like this is the perfect recipe for a black man to be successful, for a black man to know how to follow the rules, for a black man to know not to make a foolish mistake like this. But there is something in this, Shanadu, where the street life, or wanting to be seen as down, or wanting to be a part of that culture, that subculture of the black community, it pulls on us more than all of the background, all of the good teachings, all of the great opportunities. We still want to appeal to that part. And I think that's interesting. And I think there's a piece that was out there, and I'm sure you probably heard this term, the good black man syndrome, right? The good black man syndrome. And somebody applied that to me one day, and I was like, what the hell are they talking about? And it's like this idea that if you come from a certain place, if you are exposed to certain opportunities, then quote unquote, you really don't have any justification to make a mistake. Because guess what? You have been given the pathway to not be like your other brothers who are in certain conditions. And for folks, and I'm sure you heard us very quickly, that has got, as a young black man in this country, that eats at you. As an older black man in this country, that eats at you. That you there's always a sense of, or a reminder that you may have, quote unquote, outgrown the hood. I see your face, brother.
Oh,
I see your face.
Oh, I've been waiting. And I'm glad people brought this up. Listen, what you go through as a black person, poor or rich, is actually insurmountable. And people hate when I say this, but remember, we were not supposed to make it after the transatlantic slave trade. We weren't supposed to. And look at us still thriving. I will challenge to say those who are from two-parent households who, quote unquote, have that, quote unquote, better lives are the ones that I'm the most curious about. Because I'm one of those people. I remember when my parents moved into a very fine, expensive neighborhood with an 18-hole golf course and all that good jazz. And I first went, and it was almost all black people in this neighborhood. And I went to find my first group of friends. And when I found them, I realized that, we all had beautiful, huge single family homes, but we wanted to be our own gang. We even said it. And I think there's a deeper psychology in that, right? And I think we have to think on that, where when you are a black person in, a bad situation, whether that be financially, socially, economically, the hood, the ghetto, whatever you want to call it. And it's not just an American thing, it's worldwide. When you're in that situation that you now make better, by making it work, scratching and surviving good times, for some reason, that becomes the thing you want to be, even when you have better chance and better opportunity for yourself. That's why, we don't have an issue with Future, but we're calling Russell Wilson corny. That's where those type of ideas and mindsets come from, where we have this skewed set of what it is to be black and cool and black and great. And I noticed, because I was one of these people, where I felt like I wasn't black enough. You have
and real quick, and that's a good point. But then there's also this skewed view of what it means to be a black man.
Exactly. Where theoretically,
you see what I'm saying? Like we are still, and I'm saying we as black folks in this country, we still struggle with that. We still struggle that as much as we want to talk about, and I hear a lot of sisters, and we're going to take a quick pause, but I hear a lot of sisters that they want, especially women and just in general, scrolling on social media, I wish I could find me a healed black man, a black man that is not broken. And I'm like, not to say it won't happen. I truly believe black men are out there. However, you got to look at the power of the culture. You got to look at all of the stories that we have been told since we were little boys, that school is not cool and being in the street is the hottest thing. We still struggle with that as a people, especially for the next generation, where the street life, those who come from the street life into success, is more seen as successful, is glorified, is praised rather than the young black boy who goes to school every day, does his homework, and play a couple of sports, and live on the straight and narrow. He's corny. He's not real. He's trying to be like white people. And we still struggle with that all the way into our adulthood. with grown women and grown men have these very skewed views of being what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. Look, we got to take a quick pause. We'll continue the conversation with my brother Sinedu as we're talking about Ja Morant and the burden of Black masculinity. I'm going to share with you some more of what the writer from The Root has to say about this issue, and of course, get your take. So stay with us. We got a lot to get to in the right here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, you're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We've been talking about Ja Morant and the burden of Black masculinity. This is the Memphis Grizzlies basketball player who was seen brandishing a gun on a live IG post. Take a look. This is Ja Morant. And now the conversation is about what is going on with his life. Now, he has come out, and that's just a little screenshot of the Instagram live video. But many people are saying this is a cry for help. This is a sign that something is wrong. He said himself that he's been under stress and trying to deal with some things. And so the conversation about Black masculinity comes back to the forefront. Again, this is another part of a conversation that we're seeing around Black masculinity, especially with the recent cultural discussion about Michael B. Jordan, this idea of corniness. This is also part of that conversation about what we saw with Jonathan Majors on the cover of Ebony, and people questioning and all, well, what is he trying to say about Black men and Black masculinity? Black masculinity is being evaluated and being studied and being scrutinized today. And so I want to bring my brother back, Sinedu Wakorfor, and get his take on this. And folks, we're going to also get your take. But to very quickly, Sinedu, get to that point that I was making, that we still struggle with this in our community. Like there is the call there, like, you know, people might say, I want you to stay on a straight and narrow, stay on a good path. But then there's also those of us in the community that love the drama of a traumatized Black man, of a broken Black man. My man, Willie Frazier, checked in. He said, Farajii, define broken. I'm talking about a man who is not emotionally intelligent, emotionally mature, a man who has gone through some traumatic experiences and hasn't dealt with those experiences, and hasn't gone through therapy, who believes he's okay, and yet has not truly dealt with all of the demons and the pain and all of the issues that he's dealt with. So how do we reconcile that, Sinedu? How do we reconcile that within the community where we don't put those type of, put that as a metric of masculinity and redefine it?
I think very importantly, and people may not find this palatable, but oh well. I think it's really, really important that no one in the Black community describe another person as broken, because what is broken is the system. And people don't like to hear about that, but the system has so much effect on who we are. It does. The way one lives is predicated to their attitudes and their actions. That's why you can go to a zoo and walk around in the same confines of a wild animal. You couldn't do that in the safari, in the desert, right? But the environment has now shaped how that animal will act, if you will. Am I calling us animals? No, but what I'm saying is our environment and what we have sustained, never properly addressed or redressed in the culture and outside of the culture, is a huge problem. And we have now metamorphosized to this new level of the delineation complex, where it's like, oh, I'm not that nigga, or I'm not that this or that. Listen, we are of the same community. And although there may be people that are more stabilized than the others, if we are our brother's keeper, if we are many parts but one body, depending on how you want to look at it, it's a brokenness that is within our community as a whole. And a lot of that comes from society, but also us feeling like folks are better than I don't want a broken man. I wonder if that sister who made that comment, if she has done all that she needs to do to be a quote unquote altogether woman, or whatever. What is that? I even think that as an ideology is stupid, because there are so many broken parts of us as human beings altogether. And I think to diminish our brethren and not be kind of understanding to our humanity is very dangerous, because there is so much against Black women, and we know that, and there is so much against Black men, so much societally and within the culture, that it is almost overbearing.
I would agree. Let me go to what the Root had to say in this op-ed. And again, this is not about saying that he is a Black masculinity problem. I want it to be very clear. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that his actions show that there is an issue, and that he is just another case where, even though you go through you meet all of the standards, right, that you get to a high level of success, and you do something so foolish that it could jeopardize the rest of your career. Now, it hasn't, but it could. And there's a level of self-sabotage. Folks, this is not just me making up a term. Self-sabotage is real. We probably have all done it in some way, shape, or form. We get in a good relationship, or we get a good job promotion, and then there's a sense of us not feeling worthy, or a sense that this is not enough. We're like, as much as we talk about this sense of capitalism, gaining things, having stuff, and all of this stuff, living in a nice neighborhood, you still find yourself, when you even get to those places, when you start to acquire those things, you still find that you're still left unfulfilled. And that's the big thing. That's the big thing. All right, take a look at this very quickly. This is what the Root said in another quote. They say, if there is such a thing as Black masculinity or manhood, it should exist an antagonism of Western European ideas of manliness. Since men only know how to be men by not being women, Black men only know how to be Black men by not being Black women. To preserve this notion of masculinity and evade emasculation, Black men fashioned themselves as protectors, heads of household, and domineering. Too often, Black men who reject this grammar or do not embody it are viewed as soft or white. To the contrary, the assumption that the bastion of Black masculinity is a brute, protector, and head of Black women are white ideals. This was not always tradition. So even in our Black masculinity, and I think this is interesting, Sinead, there is a form of resistance that comes, right? And that we have to know it. I'm reading this book right now called The Social Animal, written by New York Times op-ed columnist David Brooks, one of my favorite columnists. And he got this book called The Social Animal. And one of the things that it talks about is that sometimes the unconscious mind is more influential and more powerful than the conscious mind, right? So that means that even though we might think that certain songs, certain images, or our culture doesn't influence us, right? Or the images that we take in, or the media that we take in doesn't influence us, then you start to create a separate persona. You know, like my therapist said, that you create like this caricature of yourself. And it's not your whole self, it's not your authentic self. It's a persona that you created in your own head. And it's a hell of a thing that you see yourself one way, but the world and the people around you see you a different way. And you got this schism between this reality of perception. But I think it speaks volumes. Black masculinity should be, and I agree with the writer, it should be against these white ideals of what it means to be a man. But for some reason, we're having a hard time to wage that fight. What's your take on that, Shahidi?
Environment.
That's it.
That's the power of the environment. The environment gets to dictate what you even find important, even if it's not important. It's you see it if you pay attention. You see it all the time on the news. Where look at what Roland Martin has done here with this network. But if you turn on the news, some of the things that we talk about here, they don't talk about it, right? But then we view the news as important, correct? That's the thing. We have to be able to define what we are for ourselves. And more importantly, we have to be able to define our Blackness outside of the schisms of what white people do, what Westernization has done, and what we deem to be credible for our collective. Because if you think about it, if we were able to properly dissect and re-engage Black masculinity, comma, Black unity, comma, women femininity, comma, women unity, as it pertains to Black people, then we'd be public enemy number one. But when we can sit within each other and masquerade around and argue, we lose out on a bigger story, the bigger news, the important news, which is dealing with what is oppressing us. And I think I've said it before. I would love for my people, I would love for us to have these conversations so that we can learn to thrive and not survive. We are great survivalists, and we need to upgrade that mindset into thriving. And I think a lot of the conversation of Black masculinity or these things that are happening are because of survivalism. Because now, a lot of, like you said, a lot of Black folks are not growing up in some of those certain situations anymore, but they still feel compelled to be in those places to garner and boost themselves. Rest in peace to the dead. But I said that when, was it Takeoff died? I said that. I said, my goodness, we have not gotten to the place where even when we're in a better situation, where we continue to go higher rather than go back. That's a problem. We got to discuss it.
And that's why we need to have it. I know some of my culture crew, y'all saying he didn't do nothing wrong. It was dumb, but he didn't do nothing wrong. But in the big scheme of things, why do a Black man who's making millions of dollars pull out a gun on video? Why does a Black man who's making millions of dollars put himself, who's hanging out with his friends at a bowling party? Now, that's not nothing wrong, but you got to understand that you at a different place in your life. So certain elements are going to be attracted to you just as much as the positive. You got the negative elements. It's a pattern. It's not that they did anything necessarily wrong, but it's a pattern that we feel like we have to keep upholding. It's a behavior that we have to keep upholding. And that's my pushback. We don't, as Black men, you don't have to be hard, quote unquote. You don't have to be from the street to get the respect. It's a pattern that needs to be disrupted. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk a little more about what's happening. I got a great conversation lined up for you about this whole idea of self-made. Are we really self-made? Can this country say that we are self-made? I got something for you to say. Nope, that's not the case. We'll have that conversation up next here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punching.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. For the second conversation for today, I wanted to talk about this idea of being self-made. This comes from another piece that was written for the New York Times, talking about the influence of this idea of being self-made, pulling yourself up from your own bootstraps, and why. And I'm putting this out there, why this may be one of the key reasons as to why we're seeing the fall of this country the way it's going. And I think that this is important to have because, again, this is another cultural piece that we have held on to since we were children. We've always told children that it's important for them to be independent. We've always taught children, and even growing up into adulthood, that in order for you to succeed, that you can only rely on yourself. But guess what, folks? That's not true. There is no such thing as self-made. And I want to bring my man Shanadu back into this conversation because Shanadu, you've been working in the area of human resources. You worked in the area of activism. You understand the idea and the value of collectivism. But there is no such thing as being self-made. Everyone needs help. I want to share with our watchers around us. Shanadu, you got this grin on your face, though, bro.
Some topics I'd be like, damn it, I'm ready.
You got this great, and then look, let me tell you, this is a topic that personally I have studied, and this is the topic personally that I have kind of just kept my eyes on for a while, because I don't want to ever tell either myself, tell my children, anyone that I'm self-made. That is not the case. That is an absolute lie, especially for Black folks in this country. That goes against everything about who we are. We are not self-made people. We are a communal people, and it's an idea that has to be abolished. Now, take a look at this. Here's what the writer from the New York Times had to say about this idea, and this is why I say why fighting the self-made myth may save America. The New York Times writer put it out there and said, quote, "Our most toxic myth is our pull yourself up by your bootstraps individualism. In extreme cases, we see even asking for help as something to avoid at all costs, which can be deadly. Or we sometimes still call leaning on our close friends and partners codependence, even after a pandemic raised depression and anxiety to record levels. We are also regularly told by self-help manuals that we need to look only to ourselves to achieve mental well-being, even though that state inevitably and biologically requires social connection. Let's go to the next quote on this one, Keenan. Take a look at this, y'all. In a society that pathologizes dependence, even as every human being is born into it, being vulnerable takes courage. On the smallest level, we can start by rewriting our narratives about achievement and attainment. We can each question how we, both publicly and privately, tend to attribute our successes to our abilities alone. The original etymology of the word dependence from both Old French and medieval Latin is, quote, hanging down or hanging from another. Learning this linguistic origin has helped me appreciate the value of being dependent even more, especially as a parent. Dependence is, if you think of it, a form of connection and social cohesion. It brings us closer to others, which at this moment in America might be the thing we need the most. Now, it's a lot to take in. But Sinedu, I would love to get your take on this, looking at this idea of being self-made. Why this myth, this whole idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps is toxic, especially for us here in this country right now.
First of all, I don't know who the fuck, sorry, made that statement, but it has to go there. Y'all, this is absolute lunacy. And it's for all my black folk out there, you know, power to the people. That whole idea of being self-made is very white. Okay. If you want to be, there's nothing black in that idea of being self-made, because there's nothing black in just thinking about the self. Like you said earlier, we are derived of community people. Community is in our soul. Even when we don't want community, we make it in every ramification of who we are. And to be honest, the reason why self and that idea of self is being broadcasted is because, with all due respect, white people do not come from a culture, a tribe that consists on togetherness. It consists on singularity. And let's go further. When you say you're self-made, somebody may say that J.P. Morgan was self-made. How do you get the money, brother?
Right.
Who do you have to impoverish to be self? Okay. And a lot of times when I hear that term self-made, it's funny because you don't come. How did you come to this world? You were attached to something. Something helped grow you up. There is no one comes into this world and is siloed by themselves. So it's a preposterous thought to produce some type of preponderance of I can do it all. And why is doing by yourself cute and cool and fun when we also know that to push policy, to push culture, you need togetherness. When you see people going for legislation, when you see good and bad, when you see Republicans throwing these different laws in different states, no one is thinking about self. It is togetherness. So as black folk, we need to stay on that train of togetherness, because that's how we move. That's how we are. And any idea that you want to be self, I'm sorry to tell you, you are cosplaying in whiteness.
Okay. Hey, look, I push back on it big time. Real Brooklyn, you say, Farajii, no one can give you, this is from Real Brooklyn. He said, Farajii, no one can give you ambition. That is something that is the foundation to success. To me, ambition is the platinum standard for success. And to me, that is the definition of self-made. However, that's the definition of drive, your ambition, you being able to but being self-made, it's absolute lunacy. I'm gonna use Sinedu's word. It's lunacy. Because every step of your growth and development, somebody is there to push you along, to support you, or to carry you in some cases. Every step. You get a new job. Somebody said, you know what? I see something in you. I'm going to give you this opportunity. You get into a more fulfilling relationship. Somebody took a chance to be in a relationship with you. You move into a different area. Somebody said, you know what? You will be perfect, a great neighbor for this neighborhood. Everything. There's always somebody giving. And here's why we should push back on it, folks. because the very essence of being dependent, we look down upon it, we frown upon it. But Sinead, you work in human resources. What is the biggest number one trait that employers often ask you about whether you have or don't have? And guess what it is? Are you a team player? Can you collaborate? Can you work with other people? This is stuff. And see, this is why, certain things of the culture has to be looked at, examined, and even just totally removed, because it's like, you want me to be a team player, but you want me to have this quote unquote rugged individualism. You want me to think about myself. You want me to always consider my interest first before the interest of the we and the whole. But that's the first thing they ask you when you. So how do you work with people?
I always say this, and I'm a tech guy.
Go ahead.
I always remind people of many things that you see in. I use a computer as an analogy. It is many. It's one thing that you're doing when you're on the computer, but it's a connection of many things. Okay. Like they say in the Bible, we are many parts. We are all one body. Like, we have to be careful. And I bring this up, especially as a DEI practitioner. I bring it up in the space where I say we have to be careful in how we promote this idea of self. I bring it up all the time. I said, because we promote an idea that we know our business doesn't even follow, right? And we've seen that before, where, we've used, not us, but where the Bible was used as a tool to do this to one people, but not that to another. So I always remind people that idea of going down that road is not only exclusionary, it's inaccurate. It doesn't work. And I think sometimes you have to step outside of what the world is and what you see and what you this and that. And remember that at all times, no matter how big you get, whether you get Oprah big or Kanye big or OJ big at one point, when all of those people are going, those people that we just mentioned that you may look at as, they're self-made billionaire, who propels their spirit, who moves them when the earth is coming down on them? It's a collective, it's a group. And in the workplace in particular, I make it my business to make sure that, as it pertains to African Americans especially, and this is not to be discriminatory, but I remind them, I said, when you all are linking up at the water cooler or laughing or somehow find each other at lunch, it's not an accident, it's innate. It's innate, it's ancestral, it is in your blood, it's who you are. I think what happens is America monetizes this idea of, I can do bad all by myself. And it is absolute bullshit.
Absolutely. Look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, Chris Big, I saw your comment. I need to address it. Real Brooklyn, I see you. I'm going to address that. Tiana, you said individualism is killing our community. You can't be a part of any community if you're only thinking about the individual. That's how deep it goes. Because, Chris, you said it. You said, Farajii, you might be thinking about this way too hard. I'm not thinking about this way too hard. I'm just tired of seeing people putting their own interests above the interests of the we, their own interests, the individual interests over the interests of the community. Chris, you said it. You are thinking about self-made way too hard. Nobody who's self-made believes that they exist out of pure divine creation. But guess what? They promote it. They make us believe it. They would make us believe that they are blessed with this just phenomenal gift, right? At the expense of everybody else not getting a gift. So if they don't actually believe it, then why is that such a part of the cultural fabric and, more importantly, the teaching of this country? If they don't actually believe it, then we wouldn't be saying it, even in the Black community, man. You got to pull up your own bootstraps. Look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, more conversation about it. Stay with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we welcome back to the show. We've been talking about this myth of self-made. Why fighting self-made, this myth may save America. This is coming out of a New York Times piece that I just recently read, and I was thinking about it, and I said, you know what? It permeates from the individual all the way up to the country. Let me just share this with you. And then Chris, you mentioned that you said, I'm thinking about it way too hard. Here's why I'm not thinking about it way too hard. This is where I did disagree with you, sir. Here's why. Because if we think about this, the individual thinks of himself as being greater, then that leads to the community not getting the full participation from that individual. So the community starts to take a loss. The community starts to take a loss. It affects the city, the state, then the country. The country gets its idea. There's an idea that is put out there, America exceptionalism, basically saying that America has been bestowed with exceptional traits and qualities that no other country has, that we're a self-made country. But even though the history of this country shows that that's not the case, that America would not be great if it wasn't for Black people. America would not be great if it wasn't for the destruction of other people. So you can't act as if, oh, I got to this position. And look, we all know what self-made is, that you did it on your own abilities, your own grit, right? Quote unquote. And that may be true that you had the what can I say? Let me bring Sinead back into this. What can we say? You had the passion to do it, but there was still someone else. There was still assistance and help that you had to get in order to get to that place. Mm-hmm. And I think that it starts to destroy us, because I'm going back to Tiana's point. Individualism. If Black folks stopped seeing themselves as individuals and we started to see ourselves as community, as being part of one, then we can feel each other's pain. We can experience each other's joy. We can build with one another without thinking we got to be in competition with one another. That's part of the reason why we're in this condition that we're in, because we feel like we got to compete. We got to compete for attention. We got to compete for resources. We got to compete for money. We got to compete for opportunities against our own brothers and sisters. And that's really counterintuitive and counterproductive. How are we supposed to build a nation, come into a better understanding of who we are? We're supposed to get into a level of independence if we all think that we're competitors. I don't compete with Sinead. Sinead don't compete with me. Whatever he's been blessed with to have, whatever opportunity, that's for him. I got mine, but guess what? I'm going to be happy for him. He's going to be happy for me. But if we go for the same job, you're not my competitor. I mean, I'm not going to put that in my mind. Oh, this man, he's trying to take my job. It may not even be my job. Out of all the things that we were in the world, we're going to beef over a little job. Come on now, Sinead. Talk to me, bro. Talk to me.
And I think, you summarized it perfectly. Summarized it perfectly. And I think that's another thing. Like, listen, I always said this, and I said this when I used to do my activism work and still do. It's not about the me. It's about the collective we. always. It's so funny. What everybody fantasized and loved about Wakanda, it wasn't about one person. It was about them all. It was about the people. Like we have to remember, we can't keep saying we want to be, we love this African this and we want to be more African. Let's not commercialize Africa. Let's not commercialize Blackness. It is a lived experience now. And that's okay. We are a collection. I always use the body because it's a great example. When you run really fast, you say stuff like, I ran fast. You don't say, my legs propelled me or my heart. But those things did move you. They're a part of you, but to be specific, they moved you. So when people make it, we are a compilation. We are a symphony of all things Black. All of us. Even if I looks like I'm going, and I remind people of this all the time. Everywhere I go in my life, I'm always thanking the person that you will not see on the stage next to me. I'm thanking the person who is dealing with me backstage to present the me on behalf of us. And that's okay. It's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a representative of your people. Y'all, it's the most beautiful thing ever. A symphony. Who wants to be a one-man band? We are a symphony.
Ooh, come on, brother. Look. I love that, Shahidi, because guess what? I don't want to be self-made. First and foremost, my parents brought me into this earth, assistants. But before that even happened, before I was coming through my mother's womb, I was a twinkle in her eye that was inspired by the Creator, by the divine, by God himself. That's assistance. See what I'm saying? See, it gets to the very root of it. And this is when I'm going back to that point that you made earlier, Shahidi, how it is such a European Western philosophy that has disrupted the natural. All of this idea that you don't need any assistance, that you don't need help in your life. It's the same reason as to why we're in this country right now. You got millions of people on Medicare, millions of people who need assistance, whether to go to school, right? Can they really say that they're self-made? Can this country constantly put that out there and say, you know what? We are a self-made people. But you got millions of people that need health assistance, educational assistance, right? Social services, right? We often talk about it in the Black community that we need more programs to help Black youth. We need more programs to help the homeless and this. But then at the same time, you want to put out there or you want to propagate self-made or pulling up your bootstraps. That does something to one's psyche when they see themselves as one thing, but the reality in which they live shows something different. You messed up in the head from that. All right, let me go to this very quickly, guys. Let me go to this. Lana, you say every time I interview the CEO, my question is, what is your biggest regret? And all say, I got money, but I wasn't there for family and I'm paying for it. See, family, community builds collective. What's the point? And Lana, I'm glad you brought that up, sis. Because what's the point? What's the point of being this great individual if no one else around you is great with you? So your family suffers. Your friends suffer. But you eating. What's the point? I don't care about eating it by myself. I'm trying to be like Jesus. I'm trying to have my homeboys around me.
Trying to split the bread and the fish. Trying to split the bread and fish.
I'm trying to eat with all the people that came with me. I'm not trying to, and this is crazy because even in hip hop music, bro, in the culture today in hip hop music, we talk about these things. We talk about it, right? And do you think that any like if you look at some of these musicians and even rappers and whatnot, some of them were in the background of bigger acts, and then that bigger act sometimes said, "All right, it's your chance. Go ahead and go out in the spotlight and shine." I don't care what artist. I don't care if it's Jay-Z. Somebody gave that man a chance. And he would be lying to his soul if he didn't say Russell Simmons or Leo Cohen or somebody didn't open up the door for him to be as successful as he is. Look, we do ourselves a disservice when we start to deny the natural self. Come on, man. Come on, man. All right, let me go to a couple of more of my crew members before we take our next pause. Okay, here we go. Real Brooklyn, you say team player contributes to the shareholders' profits, ambition give you promotions, pay raise, time off, awards, etc., etc., etc. Real Brooklyn, you are my guy. I love you. But guess what? I disagree. Sinead, you can have all that, pay raises. You still working on a team. I don't know. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Sinead. In the modern day workspace, is any individual not working on a team?
No. No, it's impossible. Everybody can't do everything. You're not doing payroll and leading the company. It's not possible. It may be indirect, but there is always team connection, even if you're a solo worker, because you're not running payroll by yourself. Someone's doing it.
So as we close out on this, because there are cultural implications of this, there are national implications of this. What do we glean from this, Sinead, as to how we move forward? How do we start to really push back on, pull up your bootstraps mentality and the self-made myth?
I'll just say this. A wise man once said, lean on me when you are not strong, and I'll be your friend, and I'll help you carry on. That's it, y'all. We can lean on each other. We can lean on each other for strength, for greatness, for excellence. And there is nothing deplorable about that. That is who we are. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't have to always be in moments of super successfulness. You know, when we're dancing and we're doing music and entertainment, we can always just lean on each other because that's who we are. You know, your mother leaned on someone before who leaned on somebody who we are a collective of leaners. And there's nothing wrong with that, because each time you lean on somebody, they're able to push you straight forward back up. And if you lean the other way, they're able to push you. That is our sturdiness, having our community to lean on.
There it is. Look, my sister Karen checked in. She said, Farajii, people need other people in order to achieve success. It is disrespectful to those who sacrificed and provided support on our road to success. I honor my role models and mentors who paved my way. Disrespectful to those who sacrificed and provided support. That's who it is. When you don't give credit where credit is due, when you don't acknowledge those who laid the path for you, then you are not worthy of your success. I'm going to say it just like that. There are people that have laid the path for me. I can't just act like, oh, I just did this on my own. If Brother Roland Martin didn't extend the opportunity for me to be a part of this network, or I crapped on him, I crapped on a man that gave me the opportunity by not acknowledging the fact that he was the one that bestowed the opportunity to me. Come on. I look ungrateful. I would look crazy. I got this on my own. No. Especially in media, you don't get nowhere on your own in media. Somebody said yes. Somebody said yes. And the sooner that we start to see ourselves not as this super dynamic, highly qualified, and very ambitious type of individual, as soon as we stop thinking of ourselves as being that person and being the person that is a team player, that knows how to work well with others, a person who can have ambition, but not at the expense of other people's interests, a person who knows that they have talent, but they still can give space to other people's talents. As soon as we make that transition, I bet you our culture and our community would be a lot better. But it is the competition. That's what happened when we were in chattel slavery. The light against the dark. The light is better. The darker is worse. That continues to happen to this day. Sinead, my brother, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for your brilliance, your intelligence, and God willing, we'll look forward to reconnecting with you next week. Inshallah. Thank you for having me. Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. Up next, we're going to talk about how in the state in Minnesota, they have established an office for missing and murdered Black women because they felt like, guess what? Those women's stories aren't being told well enough or are not being heard. We're going to be checking in with my sister, Zai Richardson, to get her take on this and so many other comments from you. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
There's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all. All momentum we have now. We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. All right, I want to switch gears to have a conversation about what the state of Minnesota is doing to address the issue of Black women who are missing or Black women who are murdered. They have now decided to move forward on a progressive piece of legislation that would institutionalize a space for the recovering and for the healing of our sisters. Legislators in Minnesota are hoping to establish what they call the nation's first of its kind organization to investigate the disappearance of number of Black women and girls in the United States. And this is the number that is disproportionately high compared to other women of other communities. Now take a look at this, and then we're going to bring my sister Zai Richardson into this. This is House Bill HF 55. Here's what the bill said based on the latest report from the Root. It says that this bill would create the Office of Missing and Murdered Black Women and Girls, and it was approved by the Minnesota House on February 20th by a majority of 110 to 19. The groundbreaking endeavor is anticipated to cost about $2.5 million and would examine the circumstances of missing person and cold cases, according to Yahoo News. Now, The bill's author, Representative Ruth Richardson of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, she said it is a high priority in the governor's budget and expressed optimism it would pass this year. In her opinion, it's a blueprint for a national response. She says, we are hoping that we can help to lead the way to ensure that Black women and girls are extended the same protection and the same support and the same energy that we see in coverage of other cases. This is so, so powerful. I want to bring my sister in, Zai Richardson. She is the founder and lead consultant of Zai Media Group, and she's going to be one of the new voices joining us here on The Culture. We're so happy to have her this afternoon. Zai, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing wonderful, Farajii. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, Zai, let's talk a little bit about this case of establishing an office of this magnitude. First of its kind, if it can get through the state legislatures. But this is something I think is a big response to a case that we don't talk too much about. I know that on Roll, I remember when I was on Rollin' Show, there were moments like we had conversations, like even with the latest case around Shanquella Robinson and other sisters who have gone into these places, or they might have traveled abroad and they don't return home and these type of things. But let's talk about the significance. This is Women's History Month. How significant is it to have a space that is dedicated to murdered and missing Black women and girls? How big is that for you, Zai?
I think as a Black woman and as a mother raising another young Black woman, it's significant. And I really applaud Representative Richardson for really championing a particular issue and really bringing attention to create legislation and an office that is designated and created for the purpose of finding out the root causes of why Black women and girls are missing. But I also want to say that it's just frustrating that in 2023, there's an over-reliance still on government and elected officials to identify a problem that in the Black community, we know it's a problem. So there's always been this longstanding idea and notion, and we've read the news that Black women are missing, that Black girls are missing. And when we see it, we sort of have a desensitization of like what's happening. So we know it's happening. We talk about what is happening, but it takes a representative in Minnesota to create an office for us to realize the significance of why that is so important, even though we as a group of people and as a community have long known that this is a problem, a reoccurring problem that has been a problem for decades, especially in poor Black communities. So to me, it speaks not only a racial dynamic, it speaks to classism, the idea that oftentimes poor and underprivileged and marginalized communities, even amongst Black people, are undervalued, even amongst us in how we talk about it, the attention that we give it, and the priority that we see it when we understand the issue and we know it's happening, but we won't really give it the attention that it deserves, even amongst us. So I think it's a landmark legislation in the office, and I applaud her. And also, interestingly, Minnesota has created a task force to better coordinate and crack down on the factors that contribute to why women of color are missing in higher levels than other women. And I think also at the federal level, there's an act called Protect Black Women and Girls Act. And I'm encouraged that at the federal level, they too are seeing that it's about time that we have a conversation with policymakers on how we can better respond to the dynamics and the realities of lived Black women all over this world, and particularly in this country.
So I'm so happy to hear that you brought up that piece of policy, because I think that is important. But it is something that even within our own communities, we don't talk about it too much, right? Unless the story gets to social media famous. That's the terminology I'm gonna use, right? But once the story gets to social media famous, everybody is kind of like sharing the story or sharing a video or what the case may be. But there's still something, there's not enough attention. Like if a Black girl goes missing, and I remember when I was living in Baltimore, there were a rash of Black girls that would go missing. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I mean, we kind of talked about it in Black media, we discussed it, but the pushback is very shocking, because there was like, this pushback was like, well, these girls are probably street or sex workers, or these girls probably went with some man, or they just ran away. And it's like all of these other excuses, instead of the very real possibility that these girls could have been kidnapped, these girls could have been harmed or murdered. These girls can be thrown into the human trafficking sex trade. All of these other things, like it was always like this victim blaming versus and victim shaming versus, no, they infringed upon it. How do we break out of that? How did we change that?
I think, there's a couple of things that are tangible causes for why that happens. I think when we really want to be honest, the way white supremacy and the way patriarchy shows up in Black communities is that it shows up by a devalue of Black women. And so I think what has happened unintentionally to sort of a Black Lives Matter movement, and really historically all the movements that have really led to significant progress for Black people, there has been a laser focus on rights, mistreatment of Black men. And so we have been significantly invested, and also publicly shamed if you don't take a stance on supporting the mistreatment, supporting people who call out mistreatment of Black men. And so we understand that. And so there's like this social pressure in Black communities to recognize that, yes, Black men are disproportionately impacted by policing. And there's all these other factors that go in. But what happens is Black women still are in that dynamic. Black women are still a part of that conversation. And so what has not happened is that same sort of attention, that same focus and call out has not happened. So you have to have a say her name just to bring it to the forefront. But I think what has to happen is Black people have to recognize that devaluation of Black women has happened in Black communities with Black people, because that's how white supremacy and patriarchy has showed up for us. And when we recognize that Black women and Black girls need just as much support and focus and dedicated resources to be successful, that's when we can say collectively that we can turn the table and we can pivot. And I think a realization in conversations like this is certainly a start. An office that Representative Richardson in Minnesota has created is certainly a start. And I think all those conversations help us with an awakening that this is a reality for us. And I just think that unintentionally we cascade Black women aside. And I also think that's an idea that goes back to slavery, this idea that the values and the perspectives and the choices of Black women, we have to always be the secondary or the assist role. So when we're always assisting, it becomes that our values, our wants and desires become secondary to the primary of the man. And it's not a matter of either or, it's a matter of both. I'm not on here to say that men are disposable and women are go roar. What I am on here to say that both have unique circumstances that are demanding and requiring and deserving of attention and support, and one is no better than the other. And unintentionally, what has happened is that the desires and the wants and the focus. So the issues of Black women missing, it can go as an undercurrent doesn't get the attention necessary because the value of Black women becomes unnecessary.
Woo! Lord, when I brought you on, I was like, let me just see what we're going to do. But no, let me tell you something. And here's what, and I know that my crew, they may not like what I'm about to say, but I got to keep it 1,000 with them. When we talk about the state, the condition, the safety and well-being of Black women, there are all these conditions about what she did first before she can get the support of men.
Yes.
Black men.
Right.
It's not like, oh, something happened to the sister, let's go. It's like, well, why was she out at that time of night?
Right.
What was she wearing?
Right.
Did she say something to the man? You know, and I think it gets back to that point you just made about, you know, how our enemy of our rise uses this level of division, uses this as part of his plan to keep us divided among the sexes. So now, as for Black women, for y'all to be like, oh man, not only am I dealing with white supremacy coming from white men, I got to deal with the chauvinism coming from Black men.
Right.
The misogyny coming from Black men. I got to prove my worth and my value.
Right.
For my brother to even give a damn about my safety and well-being.
Yep.
That's the heartbreaking part about this, Zai, that I see. My sister Mimi checked in and said, we need this for all of the missing and murdered Black women all over the country. Quote, hashtag we matter too. Mimi, you also checked in and said, when we go missing, there's always a victim blaming, shaming narrative. It is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely true. And let me go, and real quick, let me tell you how sick it goes.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how sick it is. If the woman that's missing is an attractive woman, then we take interest. Physically attractive, we take interest. If she's not physically attractive to us, then we start adding conditions for our involvement to bring her home safe.
Yeah.
I mean, this is effed up, man.
Yes. It really is. And I think when you think about that notion that somehow, as Mimi said, it does become a victim blaming. And that's something that happens in media all the time. And those of us in Farajii, working in media, in the spaces of media, it really reiterates why diversity is so important. And not just having Black faces in newsrooms, but really having faces that can relate to working class and poor communities of color all over this country. Because what we know is that just having a Black face doesn't automatically equate to diverse ideas. And I think when we can have broad representation, you'll have someone in the newsroom who can understand why the victim shaming and the blaming is so not appropriate, and it's only typically disproportionately impacted to those victims that happen to be Black and happen to be poor. Or what they consider poor based off of, as you described, there becomes this complexity of attractiveness of the victim and the victim's background. And what you have to know, and for those of us in media who are of color or who are Black women and men, what we typically do is we anticipate that victims are going to be mishandled and inappropriately discussed. So we have to mitigate that on our end. So in my work, I always try to make sure that I anticipate that's a likelihood, because I'm aware of the dynamics in newsrooms that are primarily covered and staffed by white men, especially at the executive producer levels, the news editor levels, and the EP levels. Those historically have been in those positions. And so what you have to do on my end and those in media, we really have to work a concerted effort to make sure that that we humanize all victims. And so this idea that the victim has worn the wrong dress or was in the wrong spot or somehow has accepted blame and responsibility in their own victimization is something that as media professionals, I actively and intentionally work against. And the reason why I can do that is because of my lived experience as a Black woman, as a daughter, as a mother, as a girlfriend, as a friend, as a sister, as a woman in this country. I recognize that my lived experience is something that you can't learn in a book. It's something I didn't learn in college. It's something that my experience my lived experience along with living in this country has shown and taught me. So it's created a sensitivity that you can't get unless you have lived it.
Look, we got to take a quick pause. Zai, when we come forward, I want us to continue this conversation, get some more comments from our culture crew. But I do want to kind of go a little bit further along in that point that you made about media, because one of the big things that I've often heard is the fact that Black women, whether they're missing or even Black girls that are murdered, they don't get that media attention, right? For a lot of reasons. And I want to see if that can be changed a little bit. So we'll have that conversation when we come forward. Folks, we're talking about Minnesota is looking to establish its first office, the first of its kind in the country, an office that's dedicated to missing and murdered Black women and girls. What's your take of this? More importantly, why do you see that this is important for us to possibly look into other states adopting the same type of institution? So stay with us. More conversations up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
hatred on the streets. A horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about how the state of Minnesota is moving forward on establishing a special office for missing and murdered Black women and girls, and how this would be a one-of-a-kind institution and / organization that would help to address the systemic issue of Black girls, Black women not being taken seriously, their safety and well-being not being taken seriously. We've been checking in with my sister, Zai Richardson, who serves as the founder and lead consultant of Zai Media Group, to give us her insight as to why this latest bill in the state of Minnesota is so important and why it should be duplicated around the country. I want to hear from you, though, folks. Make sure you post your comments in the chat and let me know your thoughts about this idea. More importantly, how do we change the dynamic of taking the news of one of our very own, a sister, a little girl that is either murdered or missing? How do we take that seriously enough that we make it a huge, huge deal? Zai, I want to bring you back into the frame on this, because by you working in media, you talked about, the attitudes that the executive producers and the editors and the pretty much the leadership in media, whether you're talking about paper or you're talking about television or even in digital spaces, how they don't see how they make these decisions to only give, a 1-minute blurb about a missing Black woman or a missing girl, but they might give 2 to 3 minutes, which in news time is like a whole thing. They give you a whole package. They give you a reporter on the scene. They'll talk about the person. They'll talk to the person's family. There's a whole thing. And we know that. Mm-hmm. But, it's like right now I've came across the story going back to my sister, Shanquella Robinson, who's missing and dealing with that situation, how there are a number of Black women groups, and this is crazy, but there are a number of Black women groups that are advocating for the Biden administration, for Vice President Harris to intervene into the situation, intervene in looking into and then investigating the situation. But the fact that Black women have to advocate for themselves, that's the part that gets me, Zai. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it starts with the narrative in the media. And so how do we make this important for not just Black folks, but how do we make this important the same way it's important when a white woman or a white girl is found missing? Y'all remember John Benet Ramsey?
Yes.
That story kept going on. They got documentaries, and this is the little girl that was so I think she was like 3 or 4. She was kidnapped and missing. Oh no, she was killed, I think it was. But she, they show video of her taking tap dance lessons. She was a little model and all of that. And I mean, they humanize this little girl, and they humanize white girls and white women. But when it comes to us, that narrative is not there. Talk to me about that. What do we do to change that, Zion?
No, there's a lot we can do. Gwen Ifill coined the term white missing girl syndrome. And so, that's a popular term that's been floating around, white girl missing syndrome. And I think there's the other one, there's a young white woman who was missing, Gabby Petito. And if you all are familiar with that, she was missing last year. And within, she was strangled by her boyfriend. And so she was actually strangled to death. So it's not to say that those mothers are no less sad than the other mothers. And it's not to say that we should not be empathetic to those families. Any mother or father who loses their child tragically is devastated, indifferent to color of skin. That's a universal fact. And I think when it comes to the scenario of Gabby, what happened was she went missing after she was on a trip with her boyfriend. And then what turned out to be is that her boyfriend actually was the one who strangled her. But what's important is that her family notified authorities in September. The authorities had a press conference, which means the local police department held a press conference the same month that she was reported missing. And then in that same month, the news cycle was swirling about Gabby. So most of us, not even familiar with what was happening, it was on our Twitter feed, it was on our Facebook feed, it was on our Instagram feed, and it was in our news feed. And it became a popular conversation in our local news as well as our national news. And so I think what happens is when it comes to Black women and Black girls, when we become missing, it's not that we are not reporting them, because what we know is that even though we can say the data says that 100,000 Black women went missing just in 2020, we know that's just what's being reported and tabulated in the numbers and the data. Because as an actual data set, it's likely missing a significant portion, because the numbers are never always reflective of marginalized communities. So there's always a group that's just not reporting, or they're reporting, but it's not populating up to have the recognition that's included in a larger data set. And so I think what that speaks to is it speaks to the importance of organizations and advocacy groups and local organizations to recognize that just as much as we can organize for hashtags and we can organize around Black men, when they are arbitrarily and unfairly murdered by police officers, is the same way we as a group of people can organize around missing Black women and children. And I think when we ourselves create a larger value and appreciation for this issue, and it doesn't have to be just Black missing children as an organization. It doesn't have to be just rolling, creating a space for it. When it becomes a popularized conversation amongst ourselves, is when that notion of humanization of people, women missing and girls missing, it will become a media story. And it first starts with us. I firmly believe it first starts with us.
Absolutely. And I want to get back to the data that you mentioned, because this is, I want to put up some data here, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because for our data scholars out there, sometimes folks need to see the numbers to understand how serious the situation is. Take a look at this, folks. Despite making we only make up only 13% of the population in the country. And this, according to this data, despite making up only 13% of the female population in the U.S., studies have shown that Black women account for 35% of the country's missing women. 35% of the whole country's missing women cases. Nearly 100,000, as you heard my sister Zai talk about, nearly 100,000 of the 250,000 women who went missing during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 were women of color. So you're talking about almost half of those who went missing in 2020 were women of color. Okay? According to data, take a look. According to data cited by Brittany Lewis, I'm on the second paragraph here, folks. Ms. Lewis, co-founder of Research and Action, over 60,000 Black women are missing nationwide and are twice as likely to be homicide victims than they appear to be. Experts claim that cases involving missing Black women and girls remain open for 4 times as long as cases involving white individuals. So if the cases stay open longer, we are the majority, Black women, almost the half of the cases. Many of Black women are being are found missing. 60,000 Black women are missing at least once, missing per year. It went up real high during the year of the pandemic, which is absolutely like, we need to really take a look at this and see, well, what happened during a year when everything was shut down,
right,
that you got this many Black women who were found missing.
Right.
If we were off the streets, if we were quarantining at home or we were shut down in the house, how did all these Black women go missing in a year of the pandemic of 2020, folks?
Mm-hmm.
And then let's look at the implications of that on the larger community. If you got all these Black women missing or all these girls missing, what's the future of the community?
Mm-hmm.
They can't reproduce. They're not there to provide the nurturing and the care. And I'm sure some of these sisters had children. So then you got to deal with the psychological trauma that child that 1 child, 2 child, 3 children may have had to go through because their mom is no longer with them in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the implication, the reverberation of the situation is so big, it disrupts the community on a fundamental level, Zai. And that's why and it's not just mentioning, oh, so-and-so's missing, so-and-so's missing. It's like for us to really understand that if you don't have a Black woman in the neighborhood, in the community, regardless of what her station in life may be, that community is on the brink of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Black men can be in the community, but the Black woman is of the community.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go to the other part of this, which is the other stat that I've seen, that 70% of the Black households in the country are ran by Black women.
Mm-hmm.
Well, damn.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So it just seems like y'all as Black women, y'all got to take on so many other, and I know as a Black man, we take on a lot, but there's a real problem. This is a real problem for the sustainability of our communities. And it's like, we really do have to understand the ramifications of it.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, and when I think about my personal self, I have a daughter and I have a son. And what I can say to you is that I have to be intentional about parenting my daughter because I was so laser focused on my son, losing sleep over my son because of the idea of how he would be successful and how he would matriculate and be raised as a Black man. And I lost sleep over my son. My son is now 20. I've lost sleep over him, just thinking about him and agonizing about what his experiences are going to be in school and thinking how I have to make sure I advocate for him in school. And what I can honestly admit to you is that I forgot that my daughter, really because of the socialization of my experience in this country and how I also adopted the idea of the focus of raising healthy and supportive Black boys, I forgot that my daughter's abilities and my daughter's health and sanctity as a young woman is just as important, is just as valuable, is just as significant as he is. And so while parenting is different, it's very important for me to not nullify or ignore her abilities and think that because she doesn't have the challenges, which I think are apparent and evident. And I think the media and all of us do such a great job at blasting and really pushing out and advocating for Black men, which we should. I'm a proponent of that. What I'm saying is that we have to be really intentional about giving that same support where it's due for Black girls, especially young Black girls, because human trafficking, the sexualization of Black young women, the idea that somehow the rise of plastic surgery in Black girls, what social media has done to the imagery of what we see and what we define as beauty in our hair and our looks and our skin color, in our mechanics and makeup, that is something that is pervasive for Black women and especially Black girls. And when we can have those conversations about our own socialization is when we can really pivot in a different direction. And for me, I'm a very real person and I have very real experience. And so I have these conversations with myself because I recognize I am flawed and I am human and I'm raising 2 children, and how I show up for them is being honest with myself about my inadequacies and also my strong suits. But it takes me to be honest with myself to have this conversation with you today.
And you know what? I'm so happy that you said that, Zai, because the other part of the conversation is a girl like your daughter. You talking about your daughter? My daughter's 3, and I'm mentally preparing myself that she might find herself to be attracted to a man who's not like me, right?
Right.
She can, my daughter's coming from a good home. She got an older brother. She got a dad and her mom, all of these things. But then she might be attracted to a dude that, attracts another part of her. And next thing you know, he's taking her down into a space where she wasn't expected. Mm-hmm. And that conversation needs to be had. We do put so much emphasis on Black boys to the point it's like, oh, okay, we need to kind of like watch him grow and make sure he lives and doing all the things. But that little young girl, she'd be like, he kind of cute. I mean, she's taking in the media stuff. Yep. She might be attracted to the street life's guy in the whole nine, right? But we don't know.
Yep.
And having those conversations is absolutely essential, because it is those situations that can bring a girl into a space where she gets wrapped up with a dude. She's sitting in the car. He doing time for prison because she didn't know that the car had drugs in it. We hear these kind of crazy horror stories of women who get wrapped up with one man and how that one man has taken them down a path of destruction and despair. Mm-hmm. And we need to have those conversations a lot more. Folks, I got to take another pause. Zai, if you can, I wanted to shift gears in a little bit, but I want to, if you can offer some resources about how we do have these conversations, because you also have come out of the law enforcement space. You worked with the former state's attorney and all of these things. So help us to come up with some ways or some resources on how we can address this issue. 1 or 2 things if you can. So we'll have that part of the discussion up next. And folks, I got to talk about Yara Shahidi, how she has been chosen to be Black Tinkerbell, and people are still upset. They're saying, you know what, Disney, we're tired of this. We said make original content, not just plop Black folks into white-centric stories. The folks got a point. Stay with us. Those conversations continue on the other side of the right here on the Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. I want to bring my sister Zai Richardson back, who serves as the founder and lead consultant of Zai Media Group. Zai, very quickly, I know that you have been working on this issue along with some other issues relating to Black women and girls. Is there any particular resource that you would recommend that folks can get more information either about the complexity of this issue, or if they just want to help and give their time to try to do something to address this problem?
Yeah, I think that Black and Missing is a wonderful organization that you can really just Google, and it will tell you. It's basically an advocacy organization that focuses just on this topic, singularly focused on this topic alone. And I worked with them about a year ago because in Baltimore, Akia Eggleston is a case of a young Black woman who went missing and was missing for 5 years. And her person who has been charged with her murder was just charged this past year after the case had stalled for 5 years. And so who I worked with, I learned about Black and Missing, and they were incredibly responsive. They were very supportive, and they have a host of resources on their website. They talk about legislation that's being sponsored. So if you're looking to learn about the issue, it's a great place to start. If you're looking to learn which legislation or which states are doing what, it's also a great resource for that as well. And if you yourself have a family member who is struggling or been a victim of crime just in general, every single local prosecutor's office, most offices have a victim and witness services department, and they are designed and created specifically to advocate on behalf of the family of the victims. And that can be whether or not it's a person that, it doesn't matter the crime, but every prosecutor's office has one usually, and every police department has one usually. So I would say if you are a victim of crime or you're a family member and you feel lost and just need help, you can always start right in your city individually with those two offices, from the prosecutor's office as well as from the police department's office.
Real quick, when the prosecutor look at cases like this, like you saying for that case in Baltimore, 5 years,
5 years.
Do you find that the consequences, the penalties, are they stiffer because of the nature of the case, because it is like a kidnapping, murder case, or is it just, how is that handled by the state's attorney's office?
Well, generally, it becomes a matter of what charges can be brought on a case that we know has been swirling for several years. Also, it becomes a conversation about, are there cooperating witnesses? What evidence is provable? What evidence still exists after so many years? So they then have to go back and piece together what was already publicly known and then figure out whether or not the statute of limitations is passed. And then there becomes a legal conversation about time limits, what's available, what's permissible, what's provable, and what charges match the actual crime in the estimation and the analysis of the prosecutor. So that all those conversations happen. And generally, the reason why I say that it becomes a dual fold between community and elected officials and the government is because when people are more likely to not only sort of like act like what's happening is just sort of a girl going off with her boyfriend, or a girl just being loose and just being, a teenager being a teenager, then people are more likely to report it. And then when police go and interview people are more likely to be honest about where they feel it was not just in the situation of a girl going with her boyfriend. And I think a lot of that happens where cooperation becomes a challenge, but also when the police themselves see that there's a value in the community, they will then have to also see this person was valued. So then, unfortunately, it becomes a greater value for them as well.
And generally, what happens with the family of the victims? How do they respond?
I think generally what I've learned, even, when I lost my ex-husband 2 years ago, I think everybody hates the police until you are a victim of crime, until it's your family member that has been murdered or raped or something violent, or even something where you feel like the dignity and your family member has been harmed. Most of us are calling 911. And most of us, not only are we calling 911, we are in that officer's office, we are in that detective's office, and not only do we want notice, we want representation, we want responsiveness, and we want to be felt like we are valued and heard. And so in my experience, families not only actively cooperate, they are persistent. When you know what to do, they are persistent. What happens is the criminal justice system is so confusing, it's hard to figure out who to talk to. Who do I call? Who should I notify? When the prosecutor calls me, who are you? Like, what are you doing? Is there another prosecutor? Are you the lead prosecutor? So even for me, even though I had worked in the system, it was confusing for me because it was the first time I was not the victim, and I had to understand as a victim, when a family member dies or is harmed, what do I even do? And it's confusing, but I can say universally, families want help and families want those who are responsible held accountable.
Absolutely. Zai, the time that you spent with us, the insight and brilliance that you shared with us, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have your voice on here on a regular basis, folks. This is Zai Richardson. She serves as the founder and lead consultant of Zai Media Group. And she has a phenomenal set of experiences working in a lot of different spaces. And so, you will be hearing more from Zai on the show as we talk about everything from women's issues to law enforcement and prosecution issues to community things and just getting her take on pop culture, entertainment, because she love that too. So you'll hear a lot more from her. But Zai, I just want to say thank you. Welcome to the show. And God willing, we'll reconnect with you next week. But I appreciate you for speaking on this topic of Black women who are missing and murdered, and with the state of Minnesota. My hope is we can get this thing rolling in other countries. I mean, other states.
Yes,
man, it would change the game tremendously.
It would
change the game tremendously. Zai Richardson, thank you so much for being so good for the culture. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Folks, that's going to do it for us. We're going to table that other conversation. I just had to get that one. I had to talk about that important piece, but we'll table that conversation because there's been a lot of discussion and some backlash and criticism about how Disney is approaching the issue of diversity, especially when it comes to them making their movies and telling stories. So we will certainly circle back to that. But I want to thank Zai Richardson again. I want to thank my brother Shanadu for being a part of the conversation. And I want to thank my team, King Keenan, Joel, and of course, my control room. And of course, I want to thank you for tuning in for the great comments and insights. So many of you are talking about what we've been talking about today. So we truly, truly appreciate it. Make sure y'all do your due diligence and continue to support us here at the Black Star Network. Go to our website today, blackstarnetwork.com. Make sure you download the app for free. Make sure that you financially support us. And of course, you follow us on all social media at Black Star Network. And while you're on social media, make sure you follow me, yours truly. I'd love to connect with you. You can find me at The Real Farajii on Instagram, and you can find me on Farajii at Twitter. And we would love to continue to build with you. All right, stay tuned. Up next is Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live here on Amazon News, on Black Star Network, Facebook, and YouTube at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But as always, folks, remember this: never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we will talk tomorrow for another exciting edition, very informative edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Talk to you soon. Peace.